If you think hitting $2 million means that your money worries are finally over, think again. Because for most retirees, that milestone doesn't mark the finish line. It marks the start of a new set of challenges. So you did it. You saved $2 million for retirement. You planned carefully, invested wisely, and did everything right on paper. Everyone around you says that you're set for life. But something unexpected happens. You don't feel free. You still hesitate before booking the trip, helping family, or making those home improvements. And here's the paradox. Many retirees who reach this point actually end retirement with significantly larger portfolios than what they started with. And not because they crushed the market or found some secret trading strategy, but because they were simply too afraid to spend. Essentially, they were wealthier on paper at the end of their plan, but much poorer in experience. If you're feeling this, you are not alone. Fear doesn't disappear once you hit your number. It just changes shape. And today, we're going to break down that paradox. Across every level of wealth, I've seen the same pattern. The wealthy avoid financial products that are sold with emotion and buy investments grounded in a long-term strategy. The poor and the middle class do the exact opposite. It's not how much money you save, it's what you do with that money once you have it. And that brings us to the first sin of poor retirees, the sin of emotion. This is the most dangerous trap because it disguises itself as safety and common sense. People don't buy bad investments because they want to lose money. They buy them because they crave certainty. They crave safety. They crave control. And that is exactly how the first asset is sold. Whole life insurance. It's pitched as the perfect hybrid. Tax-free growth, guaranteed returns, lifetime protection. I've even heard reps claim it can replace a 529 plan for college savings, which, by the way, is absurd. Let's be clear. Insurance is insurance. It is not a college fund, it is not a retirement plan, and it is not a growth engine. It might sound like an investment, but at its core, it's a high-cost protection product. It can make sense for very specific, high-net-worth estate planning needs. But far too often, it's oversold to people who don't need it, and misunderstood by those who buy it. Take my client, let's call him Jerry. Jerry had been paying $1,400 every single month into a whole life policy for 15 years. He thought this was his legacy plan. He thought he was building wealth. But when we dug into the details, when we looked past the glossy projections and at the hard numbers, his internal rate of return was just under 2%. He was locking up his liquidity, losing flexibility, all for something that was barely growing. But like so many investors, he couldn't let go. This is the sunk cost fallacy at play. Clinging to a poor investment simply because of how much you've already put into it. The brilliant investor Peter Lynch said that selling your winners and holding your losers is like cutting the flowers and watering the weeds. That is exactly what happens when people cling to policies that no longer make sense. The wealthy do the opposite. They constantly reevaluate. They adapt. They refuse to let old decisions weigh down their future. Now let's talk about another asset, hiding in plain sight. Timeshares. Timeshares sound brilliant, don't they? Guaranteed vacations, locked-in rates, lifetime memories. But here's the catch. They are not assets. They are obligations. Once you sign that contract, you are locked into a lifetime of rising maintenance fees, special assessments, and exchange costs that climb every single year. And when you try to sell it, you find out that the resale market is basically non-existent. I've had more than one client come to me and say, "We thought this would make us travel more. Now we just feel guilty for not using it." That guilt is the emotional hook. Wealthy retirees understand something crucial. Freedom matters more than ownership. When it comes to vacationing, they rent. when they want, where they want. They keep their cash liquid. They will splurge on a luxury hotel, not a long-term liability. But the worst part is how they are sold. Timeshare companies are masters of the bait and switch. They lure you in with a free weekend, a complimentary dinner, only to trap you in a high-pressure sales pitch for a so-called investment. It is one of the most aggressive and misleading sales tactics out there. Now, if you think timeshares are bad, just wait. Let's talk about the ultimate emotional trap. The one sold as guaranteed income. Variable and high-fee annuities. This one is personal for a lot of people. The pitch sounds perfect, especially if you're a nervous investor. Potential for guaranteed income. Tax-deferred growth. Downside protection. It seems so comforting. But what gets left out of the sales pitch? The 3 to 4% minimum in annual fees. The complex, confusing riders that cost even more. And the 7 to 10-year surrender charges. A penalty that locks up your own money and makes it impossible to get out. Let me tell you about Dave and Susan. When they retired, they were in a great position. They had a pension. They had Social Security. Together, those two sources were enough to cover all of their living expenses for life. On top of that, a big goal was to maximize their retirement accounts for their kids when they inherited it. They did not need more guaranteed income. But a bank advisor convinced them to roll $500,000, $500,000, into a variable annuity, just to be safe, which, by the way, kicks out a massive commission to that advisor. 4 years later, their account was worth less than what they started with, and they couldn't touch their own money without paying a hefty penalty. I will never forget what Dave said to me. He said, "We thought we were buying safety, but it turns out we bought a trap." And that line stuck with me. Wealthy retirees do not buy products they don't understand. If they want growth, they invest in transparent, flexible strategies. True safety doesn't come from a false guarantee buried in a 100-page contract. It comes from clarity, knowing what you own and why you own it. This brings us to the second sin of poor retirees, the sin of confusion. This trap is designed to make you feel stupid, so you'll pay someone else to feel smart. And it's hiding in plain sight in most portfolios, actively managed mutual funds. They are marketed with confidence. Beat the market. Expert management. Exclusive strategies. But here's the data, which Vanguard analyzes almost yearly. Over the long run, more than 85% of active managers underperform simple, low-cost index funds. Why? Because of high fees, high turnover, and even taxes. I once met a couple who thought they were paying a reasonable 1% advisor fee, but when we did a deep dive, their portfolio was filled with A-share mutual funds that had front-end loads and internal expense ratios averaging another 1%. And their advisor fee wasn't 1%, it was 1.75%. Their total all-in cost was 2.75% per year. That's $27,000 annually on their $1 million portfolio. That is nearly $700,000 lost to fees over the course of a 25-year retirement. Wealthy retirees know that costs compound just like returns. They favor low-cost, simple, transparent ETFs and index funds. This sin of confusion also includes Wall Street's favorite inventions, structured notes and other complex investment products. They are often sold with fancy phrases like market upside with downside protection. Sounds great, right? But buried in the fine print are layers of illiquidity, hidden fees, and complex conditions that most investors never fully understand. The truth is, complexity doesn't reduce risk. It hides it. As Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch have famously said for decades, if you can't explain what you're investing in within 30 seconds, you probably shouldn't own it. Wealthy retirees understand that simplicity isn't boring, it's powerful. Because the simpler your plan, the harder it is for anyone to sell you nonsense. But it's not just Wall Street products. This brings us to the third and final sin of poor retirees, the sin of nostalgia. This is when an asset is no longer an asset. It's an anchor. I'm talking about the oversized home. For many retirees, your home isn't just a roof. It's where memories live. The birthdays, the milestones. It's emotional. That's understandable. But once the paycheck stops, that same home can quietly shift from a source of comfort to a financial anchor, especially if the kids are gone and you're holding on more for nostalgia than for your actual lifestyle. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, landscaping. If you're in a high-cost state, it can eat your income alive. Take my client, Lisa. She was paying nearly $4,000 a month between her mortgage, taxes, and upkeep for a large home she barely used, 5 bedrooms, and it was just her. When we ran the numbers, downsizing freed up $800,000 in equity and cut her housing expenses in half. But the real transformation wasn't financial. It was emotional. She told me, "I finally feel light again." The wealthy know that downsizing isn't downgrading. It's right-sizing your life to fit your new priorities. Keep the memories, not an unnecessary mortgage. This sin of nostalgia also applies to the final asset, rental properties that drain more money than they make. It usually starts with good intentions. We'll buy a second home, rent it out, and generate passive income. But then, emotion sneaks in. People fall in love with the property. Repairs pile up. Months go by with no rent check. I had a couple, John and Karen. They bought a beach house that they swore would fund their retirement. They planned to Airbnb it. Over 2 years, they dealt with 2 vacancies, a $16,000 roof repair, and a flooded kitchen from a broken water heater. That property wasn't an income stream. It was a money pit. At that point, they weren't investors anymore. They were subsidizing nostalgia. To be clear, real estate can be a great investment. The wealthy certainly own it, but only if you treat it like a business, not a hobby. Wealthy retirees track every expense. They calculate their return on equity, and they cut losses early if it's not working. Because if an asset doesn't pay you to own it, it's not an investment, it's an expense. So let's recap the assets that rich retirees avoid. First, the sin of emotion. Whole life policies, timeshares, and variable annuities, all sold by promising safety, but trapping you in complexity. Second, the sin of confusion. High-fee mutual funds and structured notes that hide risk behind fine print. And third, the sin of nostalgia. Oversized homes and bad rental properties that bleed you dry. The wealthy retiree wins not because they're fearless, but because they are disciplined. They avoid emotional decisions. They focus on math, clarity, and a long-term perspective. And here is the truth that most people miss. The wealthy don't buy differently because they're lucky. They buy differently because they think differently. They play defense first, knowing offense only matters when your foundation is solid. If you found this video valuable and it gave you a new mindset, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe. That way, you won't miss out on our next video. And I have one more challenge for you. Click the video on your screen right now. It reveals the other major trap we discussed, the $10,000 widowhood tax trap, and shows you exactly how to build a fortress around your IRA. Don't stop here. Keep learning. I'm Kurt Suplee from XRP Today USA. It's time to stop making decisions based on emotion and start building a plan based on strategy.